If we have it, we do now. Welcome, members of the public joining the Planning Applications Committee. We have no, inverted commas, outsiders, so we will not have fire instructions. Therefore, may we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Peter Barnett.
Thank you very much. Members, are you agreeable that I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Thank you, members. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us straight through to the first item on page 9 of your agenda, at numbers 22 to 30 Sturt Road, Frimley Green. Firstly, declarations, please. Councillor Whitcroft.
I'd like to declare an interest, please, as one of the speakers is my father, who is representing the Resident Society, but I do come to the meeting with an open mind.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations to make? No. Then Mr. Carty, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application was originally reported to the August Committee, but was deferred from determination because the heads of terms for the required legal agreement had not been confirmed at that time. These matters are now resolved and are set out in paragraph 1 of the update report. In addition to these requirements, the amount of non-SANG infrastructure provided through SIL is indicated on the update. This application relates to a site at the edge of Frimley Green on previously developed land and in the defined countryside. The proposal is to provide 160 dwellings on the former waterboard site, last predominantly used on the northern part by Mighty, and the southern part currently used as a builder's yard. The proposal has been assessed on its viability and a residual amount has been confirmed and agreed by the Council's viability assessor. This is to be provided through a level of affordable housing provision below, but this is below policy CP5 requirements. The 15 units to be provided represent 9.4% and would be subject to a review procedure prior to commencement, where the proposal would be retested in case more affordable housing can be delivered at that time. Contributions towards SAM measures and towards a local flood relief scheme have also been confirmed. In addition, amounts for SANG towards SANG in Hart District and infrastructure through SIL and not including SANG are also confirmed. The contribution towards education provision is not provided for the reasons set out in the update report. Please note the updates and I'll lead you through the drawings and photos. The site location plan for this proposal is shown on the left part of the slide. The application site lies on the west side of Sturt Road, which runs north to south, between Frimley Green and Mitchett. The site includes a principal access to the Mighty site and a second access to the builder's yard further south. A third access at the south end of the site is shared with a scaffolding yard beyond to the southern boundary of the site. Frimley Lodge Park lies to the east of Sturt Road with the listed Church of St Andrew. The main rail line from Farnborough to London Waterloo runs across the top edge of the plan at the north boundary of the site. The local rail line from Reading to Guildford runs down the west boundary of the site with the lake for the quays on the west side of this rail line. The context plan is shown on the right hand of this slide and is based upon the local plan proposals map. This includes the countryside area in turquoise blue and the settlement areas of Frimley Green to the north and Mitchett to the south. The curved line and area to the southeast of the plan, I can locate it, running at an angle, a rounded angle there. That is the 400 metre SPA buffer. The application site lies wholly outside of this buffer. This is a photo of Sturt Road looking south with the application site on the right-hand side. The grounds of the Church of St Andrew lie to the west side. This is the photo of the main offices on the site. The building lies behind the main northerly access point. And this is a photo of the builder's yard taken from the secondary access to the site, which is centrally located off Sturt Road. This is the former pump house building, which has been used more recently as the staff restaurant and most recently as training rooms. This building is late Victorian and is defined as a non-designated heritage asset, which is proposed to be retained and converted into houses under this scheme. This is the listed Church of St Andrew, which lies east of the application site. This is the proposed layout. There are two principal accesses to the site, which connect within the site through a spine road, off which there are a number of cul-de-sacs and parking courts and sheds, and there's a number of shared services. The pump house is located towards the centre of the site, indicated in orange, and the scheme has been the subject of pre-application process and amendment during the processing of this application with the support of the Council's urban design consultant, which have resulted in improvements to the setting of the pump house building. The proposal includes a range of housing, including flats, terraced, semi-detached and detached housing from 1 to 4 bedroom units. The flats are provided in 4-storey blocks in a number of locations around the site. The proposed affordable housing units include the residential block for plots 21 to 31, which is in this location, and plots 64 to 67, which are 4 houses in this location. Here's some typical elevations of the proposed houses, and these include mostly 2-storey dwellings with some 2-storey houses with accommodation in the roof. The proposal would provide dwellings with a traditional design and materials with a number of traditional features. These are some of the elevations for the proposed flats, which include a number of design solutions reflecting the location of those flats on the site. Top left is the block for plots 1 to 20, which is north of the main access point, and it's designed to reflect its parkland setting. The remaining blocks, particularly the bottom blocks, which are for 71 to 85 and 97 to 115, are provided to reflect the commercial history of the site and have a traditional Victorian warehouse design. The following slides are provided to give an artistic impression of the proposal in its setting. This is a view of the main access point from Sturt Road. This impression has been deliberately provided without the expected level of landscaping, so that views of the housing, which would be behind this landscaping, are clearer. There would be an expectation for more landscaping than shown, which would be provided by condition. This is a second view from Sturt Road. This is from the access to Frimley Lodge Park, looking towards the secondary access into the site. Again, more landscaping than shown would be expected and will be provided by condition. This is a view within the development, looking at the front of plots 1 to 20 with the children's play area in the middle distance. This is a visualisation of the pump house building and how it would look amongst the new development. The cobbled shared surface is shown to the front. The flats at 71 to 85, the design of which provides the link to the commercial past, are in the distance on the right-hand side. Here is a slide providing heads of terms as set out in paragraph 1 of the update report for your information with the SIL payment as confirmed on the update. It should be noted the large amount for SIL that is required for this development. It should also be noted the benefits that arise from these heads of terms. The proposal will contribute towards a scheme to improve the local flood issue on Sturt Road, to reduce the possibility of a future flood event making the road hazardous or closing this road. This is considered to be a significant local benefit arising from the proposal. The principle for the development is considered to be acceptable, with the proposal meeting the requirements of the spatial strategy, development on previously developed land in a sustainable location in the western part of the borough, and with a very limited impact on the loss of commercial land. The MPPF supports development that is sustainable. As indicated earlier, the proposal has been the subject of significant involvement with the Council's urban design consultant, and her comments have been appended to the original report from page 59 of the agenda report. This has led to significant changes from pre-app and through the application process. The proposal is large enough to create its own character. The proposers tried to create a sense of place and identity for the proposed development. The design has been led from the character of the retained pump house building. The proposers provided connectivity with a footpath along the majority of the length of the site, with uncontrolled crossings onto Sturt Road linking to Frimley Lodge Park and the nearby settlements. It has led to a well-designed scheme which will enhance the local character. The proposal would provide a sizable amount of housing towards the borough's 5-year supply of housing. The current position is that the council can demonstrate a 4.85-year supply of housing only. The housing supply position is to be reviewed later this year, and if the 5-year supply with the buffer is reached, this could lead to less pressure on delivering housing in more sensitive parts of the borough. This is a significant benefit of this proposal. The proposal has been rigorously tested against viability, and Mr. Molyneux of the Dixon Soil Partnership, the Council's viability advisors, is here to speak about this aspect of the proposal. No objections are raised to the proposal from the Environmental Health, Local Lead Flood Authority or the County Highway Authority. The application is recommended for approval subject to the completion of a legal agreement as set out on pages 39 to 50 of the agenda report. I will now pass to Mr. Molyneux, who will make a brief presentation and will be able to answer questions later after the speakers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carty. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chairman. I have produced a summary of the viability process so far and the outcomes, which I hope everyone's had a chance to look at. Apologies for it being quite long, but it has been quite a long and complex process, and this was about the shortest summary we could produce that did justice to the level of scrutiny that this has been put under and the various different iterations of the process and the assumptions that have been considered. So we were commissioned to review a viability report submitted by Berkeley Homes in December 2020. And essentially, viability assessment considers the total revenues for a scheme, deducts the total costs, and then compares the remaining value, the residual value, with a suitable benchmark land value. And that benchmark land value is not based on the market value of the land or the amount paid for the site. As per the planning policy guidance, it should be based on either the existing use value of the site or a suitable alternative use. So the permission as submitted by the applicant was they allowed for a benchmark land value of £8.9 million. And as presented, the scheme generated a residual profit of 6.1 million, which was 5.9 million below their stated profit target of 12 million, resulting in a negative outcome before the inclusion of any affordable housing. We reviewed all the assumptions made by the applicant, and we formed a different view, picking up on various areas, including the benchmark land value. As I said, Berkeley thought the site was worth 8.9 million based on its existing use as a scaffolding yard and separate offices, which at the time were almost completely unoccupied. We agreed with their valuation of the scaffolding yard. We disagreed with their opinion on the existing use value of the office element, which we considered was based on an unrealistic scenario and was set too high. Overall, we considered that a suitable benchmark land value for the whole site was 5.7 million, which was 3.2 million less than put forward by the applicant. We also considered the submitted build costs to be high, and we benchmarked them against the RICS Building Cost Information Service. Therefore, a third-party cost consultant, which was ERMC Surveyors, was commissioned to review the scheme costs on behalf of the council. They concluded that the costs were likely to be overstated by 1.8 million. So in our appraisal, we applied the cost put forward by ERMC Surveyors. We also considered the amounts being allowed for sales and marketing costs to be excessive and applied our own assumptions on those. We also thought that the assumed length of time to build the scheme out was too long, so we reduced that in our appraisal. And finally, the profit, we considered a 17.5% profit on gross development value to be suitable for this site. The applicant considers a 20% profit allowance to be necessary. So when we applied all our assumptions in our appraisal, this shifted the stated position from a 5.9 million deficit to a significant surplus. And we concluded that the nil affordable housing that they put forward was not appropriate in this case. Following that, the applicant came back with a rebuttal, and we also had a meeting with the applicant to discuss the assumptions. They chose to set aside some matters and challenged our alternative assumptions on really the three most significant things, which was build cost, the benchmark land value, and the profit assumption. All of these things are often the source of debate, and you do tend to get different opinions and different decisions at appeal on all of these matters. There wasn't agreement in the end between ourselves and Berkeley Homes, and so with the aim of moving the case forward without any further cost and time to either side, we tried to find common ground, really, which is something that planning inspectors look for at appeal anyway. So in order to do that, we considered a build cost that was midway between the opinion of ERMC Surveyors and that of Berkeley Surveyors Artelia. So we added 900,000 to the build cost we'd originally assumed, but that was still 900,000 lower than put forward by Berkeley Homes. We also reconsidered the BLV, taking into account some of the points that Berkeley had made in our meeting. However, we still considered their benchmark land value to be excessive. We considered potential alternative uses, for example, turning the whole site into open storage, or the whole site being a scaffolding yard, and also reconsidered the existing use. Again, we still didn't agree on that, but overall we upped our suggested benchmark land value by just over £1 million. So we considered a benchmark land value of 6.7 million, which was still 2.2 million lower than the suggested benchmark of 8.9 million. And then finally on the profit, purely with a view to moving things forward, there wasn't agreement on the profit. We agreed to test a position of 18.5% profit on GDV, so moving towards the applicant's suggested profit level of 20%, as compared to our suggested 17.5%. And the outcome of that, when we ran that through our appraisal, was that there was a surplus of £304,000. But at that point, we were also informed by the council that the education contributions that had been assumed in the submitted appraisal, and therefore in our appraisal, were actually likely to be about £600,000 lower than anticipated. So it was considered that that could be added to the surplus we'd identified, meaning, in our view, there was around £900,000 available that could be either a financial contribution or go towards providing affordable housing on site. The council indicated that the preferred position would be to have affordable housing on site, and preferably in the form of first homes, a form of discounted market sale. We therefore tested the effect of including some first homes on the site, and we came up with some approximate amounts of subsidy that would be required to provide those homes. So based on the £900,000 that was available, we concluded that up to 12 units of affordable housing could be provided, depending on the size and type of units that the council wanted and that were agreed with the applicant. That was really the end of our involvement with the viability, but I understand that after that, negotiation continued between the council and the applicant, and there was also still some uncertainty about a flood relief scheme at that point, which has since been resolved. And the eventual outcome was that the applicant offered 15 affordable housing dwellings as discount market sale, in addition to various contributions and a SIL contribution, which I've set out in the table in my summary, just to show how it differs from what we'd assumed in our appraisals. So the various contributions and amounts are different, but the net position is the overall contributions are £27,000 higher than assumed, and in place of the up to 12 units of first homes, the applicant has offered 15 units of discount market sales, which equates to 9.4% affordable housing. So in summary, we reviewed that, and in summary, there's been rigorous review of the viability for this scheme, and we consider that offer that's been made to be fair and suitable in the circumstances. It is below the policy compliant amount required by policy, and this, in our view, is mainly due to the high existing use value of the site. It's a large site, some of it's in use as a scaffolding site. It does have a considerable value, along with the fairly high development costs to produce the scheme and achieve the values that are being sought. So essentially the outcome of the whole process was it's moved from the original offer of nil affordable housing contribution to 15 units of discount market sales affordable housing provision on site, which we considered reasonable in the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Molyneux. If you can stay on, please, we will have the questions or presentations from speakers, and then we'll come back to question time from members, if that's in order. Thank you. We now have 3 speakers, members. Firstly, he's Mr. David Whitcroft. Just for the record, I have known Mr. Whitcroft for many years, when he's a councillor and subsequently post being a councillor. I think Councillor Whitcroft has also declared an interest. I don't think there are any other interests on that one. So, Mr. Whitcroft, welcome to you. Nice to see you. You have 4 minutes, and you will be advised when you have 1 minute remaining. So the time will start when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak this evening on behalf of the Mitchett, Frimley Green and Deep Cut Residents Society. And I want to say, first of all, that we have no objection at all in principle to residential development on this site. The mix of housing and the retention of the Victorian pump house are both welcome, and the use of an obvious brownfield location for housing development is also a principle totally accepted by the Society. We do, however, have specific objections, and these are set out in more detail in our letter of objection, the details of which have been previously circulated to committee members. This evening, I would just like to highlight 3 main areas of concern. The first is the density of the housing. The number of houses is significantly above the indicative number of 99 shown in the local plan. We've sought to do a proper density assessment, but our requests for actual density figures have not been met. Nonetheless, whether you consider the ratio of gross floor space to site area or the number of habitable rooms per hectare, it is pretty clear as vividly illustrated by the layout plan for the site, that this is a high density scheme that is completely out of keeping with the local area. As indicated by the officer's presentation, the scale and massing of the buildings is excessive. In particular, 5 blocks of flats dominate the street scene, and in this setting, opposite a church and a park, are particularly oppressive. The room sizes and gardens of the properties proposed are cramped. This is going to lead to poor living conditions, especially now with more people working from home. And in our view, this is designing in problems for the future. The density also impacts on other factors, such as the lack of parking spaces, which there are less than 1 visitor parking space for every 10 houses. And of course, it will have a major negative impact on local facilities such as medical services. Second point I want to touch upon is affordable housing. Only 15 affordable homes instead of the 56 called for by council policy are proposed by the developer. The council consultants, whose very complex summary report, and I think the complexity of this was illustrated by Mr. Molyneux's earlier comments, was only issued this afternoon, which means that the society has not had enough time to properly consider it. We therefore ask 2 simple questions. First, why is one of the most profitable building companies in the United Kingdom being allowed to reduce affordable housing provision for the children of local Surrey Heath residents whilst projecting a 20% level of profit on this site? This seems totally unacceptable to us. Additionally, we ask, why does the council have a 35% requirement for affordable housing in the borough if major builders such as this one can totally ignore it? The third point I want to touch on briefly is the environmental issues. The drainage and flooding issues in the local area are well known. This is not properly addressed in the plan, in our opinion, and the provisions indicated are, to say the least, unconvincing. The loss of so many mature trees, another consequence of such a high density plan, must also have a negative impact on biodiversity. The replacement trees are neither adequate for screening nor in carbon capture compared to the existing treescape. Finally, the tiny nod towards local energy production through a small amount of heat pumps and solar panels is simply a token gesture. In the current context of a climate emergency, this is totally inadequate and not the sort of response we, and I would suspect the council, might expect from a responsible developer such as Berkeley Homes. We urge you, therefore, most strongly to reject or defer this application. As I said at the beginning, we are in favour of development on this site, and we would welcome revised proposals that are less dense and more compatible with the local area, but which also feature a higher level of affordable housing for the use of local residents and are more socially and environmentally responsible. That concludes my comments. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Whitcroft. If you can stay there for any questions of a planning nature from the committee. Members, do you have any questions for the speaker? No, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Whitcroft. And now, Mr. Mogford, please.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. My wife and I live right opposite the proposed development, actually right opposite the mighty office block, and therefore we have a very real interest in what happens to that site. I entirely agree with Mr. Whitcroft's comments. Frankly, instead of an industrial site and a disused office block, we would prefer to have a pleasant, thoughtfully designed estate in keeping with the semi-rural gap between Frimley Green and Mitchett. However, this proposed design is ill-conceived and very poorly designed. My objection letter detailed 5 objections to the proposed development, together with photos, cross-references to the planning submission, and suggested mitigations to my objections. But to summarise, firstly, the impact on traffic volume and flow. The development is designed on the assumption that Frimley Green is readily accessible on foot or on bike, and that assumption is seriously flawed. Anyone who lives near Frimley Green knows that the footpath under the railway bridge is often impassable to cyclists and pedestrians due to flooding. You risk a soaking from spray of even relatively slow-moving cars. Buses and HGVs create a bow wave that results in your shoes being filled with filthy water. The narrow footpath under the bridge is a permanent barrier to many. The restricted width prevents parents with side-by-side style children's buggies and disabled people using extra-wide wheelchairs. Solving the bridge problem is perfectly possible. And I have an example of how that can be done shown on the map in my written submission, if you care to refer to that later on. Moving on. The traffic forecast flows in section 6.4 of the Transport Assessment Report states that the report was made with reference to the 2011 census data. In other words, the traffic impact figures are estimated as an estimate based on 10-year-old statistical data. That cannot possibly be a reliable base for estimating traffic volumes 2 or 3 years from now when the development is complete. Indeed, the report goes on to say that it cannot be relied upon, stating at the end of section 5.9, and I quote, that a further assessment of the local highway network should be undertaken. Councillors, how can you approve this application based on wildly out-of-date traffic data and without the recommended reassessment? The plan shows a seriously unsafe pedestrian access at the north end of the development. In other words, right next to the bridge on the southern side. The site plan shows pedestrian access to very close to the bridge with no pavement under the bridge on the proposed development side. You have to cross Sturt Road. It's a dangerously blind corner, as many of us who drive down there know. Imagine a harassed mum attempting to push a buggy in one hand, thank you, and dragging a truculent toddler in the other hand. The minimal line of sight is just designing in an accident waiting to happen. As I've just demonstrated, this is utterly impractical. Furthermore, quickest cycling or walking routes to Farnborough Main are under the bridge. Car journey every time. Finally, loss of trees. Your own arboricultural officer's response makes some highly critical comments of the proposed development, including the loss of trees. I entirely endorse his comments, and his questions must be fully answered to his satisfaction before permission is granted. Therefore, this proposed development is unsafe to pedestrians, will increase traffic flows, and will degrade the environment. I strongly urge you to reject it in its present form. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mogford. Again, if members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed to you. And now, Mr. Gilchrist. Sorry. Despite Mr. Gilchrist, again, the same rules as apply, and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm David Gilchrist, the Development Director of Berkeley Homes, speaking as the applicant for the scheme. As you've heard this evening, the proposed scheme is a 160 dwelling development of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, as well as 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom houses, including 15 affordable homes on a brownfield site, which is proposed to be allocated for residential development in the emerging local plan. This site will make a significant contribution to the 5-year housing land supply, and importantly, will help protect other greenfield sites from being developed. Following the submission of the application in November last year, we have worked collaboratively with planning and urban design officers to create a scheme which is both in keeping with the local vernacular and retains distinct character. Character areas through the site have also been developed, reflecting the unique design approach whilst also integrating existing local patterns. At Berkeley, we pride ourselves on creating high quality developments with a strong commitment to placemaking. A good example is the retention of the Victorian pump house at the heart of the scheme. Whilst the pump house is not listed, we believe it is worthy of retention, and we're proposing a sensitive conversion of the building to 3 dwellings. An improved setting for the pump house will be created with the layout around the pump house being in a muse character. You'll be aware that the application was due to be presented to committee last month, and it was agreed to remove it from the agenda to enable the resolution of a couple of final matters, particularly in relation to drainage and affordable housing. The on-site drainage has been agreed with drainage officers at Surrey Heath and Surrey County with a sustainable drainage solution. In addition, we have also agreed a resolution for the ongoing drainage issue under Sturt Road Railway Bridge. Local members will be aware that this area is prone to flooding after heavy rainfall. Bartley have agreed to fund £195,000 towards a local flood relief scheme to solve this issue. We've also agreed the principle of the underground drainage infrastructure being located on site to help with the bridge drainage. As we understand the importance of creating a balanced and sustainable new community, we have confirmed that 15 new affordable homes will be provided on site regardless of the submitted viability assessment. This is in addition to the £195,000 contribution to the flood alleviation scheme, the SIL, SANG and SAM contributions. This has been a truly collaborative process with officers, which has resulted in a well-designed scheme providing a significant contribution to the 5-year housing land supply. As we have recently demonstrated at our other local developments at Lumina and Pembroke House in Camberley, we have an excellent reputation for working closely with the council and local stakeholders to deliver these schemes. From concept to delivery, we will continue to work collaboratively to ensure our proposed development at Sturt Road adds to this positive legacy. I do hope you find yourselves in a position to agree with the officer's recommendation this evening and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, members, do you have any questions for the Speaker? Councillor Whitcroft. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler. Do apologise.
Councillor Whitcroft, we obviously look more alike than I thought.
Just don't go there. I'm sorry.
Yes, I do. I have to say one of the things on this scheme and looking at this scheme, there's a couple of concerns that I have around parking. We've got 2 parking spaces which are allocated in front of each other. So we have the butterfly scenario for those of us that are old enough to remember it, whereby a car comes in, somebody has to go out, they have to reverse out, the next car has to drive in. So I wonder, it may be a question to Barclays agent, or it may be a question to the officers, but it's the space and size of those parking spaces. I'm also quite alarmed, if you could tell me please, how you are designating the car parking spaces. So in particular, in relation to car parking spaces that refer to the flatter development, numbers 83, 84 and 85, which are some distance from the flatted development, and certainly would, by their location, be more likely, I would have thought, to be used by visitors to 86, 87 and 88, because they are some distance from the building. We've also not got there any idea of any kind of street lighting or anything or street furniture that will be there. And I have to say that as a woman, that distance from where I'm living to where I'm parking would concern me. So designation, that's you know, the concerns are something different. But if you could tell me, please, how those parking spaces will be protected for the use of those flatted developments only. And then the other one comes to refuse bins. Where do the houses keep their refuse bins? Because we've got very short front gardens, we've got no direct access to back gardens in many cases, and I just wondered where the storage area was for those. And then, given the proximity to the railway lines, we've got a number of shared refuse stores, and I'm just worried about rats and what protection and what methods are going in for rats. The other things I'll bring up at a later date, if I may, Chair. I've got a number of other comments as well, but I wonder if you're kind enough to come back on those points, please. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Wheeler. I'll put those questions to Mr Gilchrist, and can I just add on to your list, please, the refuse bins for the flats as well?
There is a storage area.
Yeah, it's how that operated. You know, we know that from a number of different places. So, Mr. Gilchrist, hopefully you got all of that. If not, Councillor Wheeler will take you through as you progress.
I think I've got everything. Turning to parking, I think it was really about the parking allocation. We will, when purchasers buy a property from us, if it's a flat, they will have a right to park in one of those spaces, and it will be an identified space, and it will be their parking space. On a development like this, we are likely to have some kind of parking control and parking management to ensure that the parking is maintained as we originally envisage, and that people's parking spaces are being used for themselves and they're not being parked with for the people. When I think on the parking standards, I think the parking for the Surrey standards for the development is, I think, 206 parking spaces, and I think we're providing 276 parking spaces. So we are significantly in excess of the parking standards for the scheme. And turning to lighting, we did submit a lighting assessment as part of the application. And I'm just flicking through the committee report, because I believe there is a condition in the committee which requires lighting details. I'm sure Mr. Carty can correct me if I'm wrong, but we in any event, we want to ensure that there is adequate lighting, because safety and security of our residents is of utmost importance to us. Refuse, I think the question was, where are the refuse bins stored? There is space in the rear gardens for refuse bins, and for the houses, we have ensured that there is rear access to every house. So there is scope for them to take their bins from their rear garden, and then we normally provide refuse storage points on the street at bin collection day. In terms of rats, I'm not entirely sure on that point. It's something that we'd have to look into. I would hope that we wouldn't have any rats, but to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how I can answer that question.
Thank you. I'll just come back. Sorry, just to say the question was, how are you designating the car parking spaces, please? So, as I said, in particular, we have got flat number 85, and then I've got 4 houses, and then I've got my parking space. So I appreciate that every flat has with it a parking space, but the question was, how will that be designated so it is obvious to visitors and to residents? I'm just thinking about my poor local councillors, who I can see spending an awful lot of time dealing with neighbour disputes in relation to the current parking arrangements that you've got.
Absolutely. I mean, we normally provide some kind of detail on the actual parking space itself, be it a small disc which shows which parking spaces is allocated to which particular house or apartment. And something that we have done on previous developments as well is that when residents move in, we give them a parking plan which shows whose parking spaces are allocated where. So residents will know which are their parking spaces and which are allocated to other homes and which are visitor parking spaces.
Can I just come in on a question, picking up something you mentioned, parking management, and it really covers the estate management. How are you proposing to deal with that? And I will have a second part to that question.
We will. The estate will be managed by a management company. The idea is that none of the roads or the open areas of space on the development will be adopted. This will be maintained by the management company, and the residents will pay a very small estate charge, which will help maintain these areas. And then the management company will then be responsible for having a parking management plan, which will be used across the site.
Councillor White, you might want to come in on that point.
We found out to our detriment in Bagshot that the management companies don't actually work. We have an estate of 184 houses, I think it is, in Earlswood Park, and there is trouble every day regarding the management company. I would ask you to rethink this.
Yeah, I'll come back in here. My concern is the control of costs because I'm just thinking of another estate where the management costs are continually rising. And how would you propose to keep costs, inverted commas, affordable to all residents on the estate?
We encourage residents of the development to become directors of the management company, and they then have the say, and they then are in control of those costs and how the management company is run. I think this is an approach that we've used on a lot of our developments, and we haven't experienced significant problems at all. And to be honest, it's a feature that works very well on a lot of our schemes, and it enables the development to look good and to make sure that it is well maintained.
Thank you. Mr. Carty, do you want to come in on that?
Just to pick up some issues that have been raised here, just to confirm, there is a condition proposed for the agreement of details of cycle and refuse storage areas, notwithstanding the details that are shown. This will pick up the details that are required for the houses which are not shown on the layout plan. There's no condition specifically to agree details of external lighting. Clearly we can add that if the committee agrees and supports the proposal. There is a condition on that it should be in compliance with the external lighting assessment, but not the details of the external lighting, which again you could think of if you wish to add that. Just to let you know, in terms of, we're talking about the management of the sites, there is a plan that's been provided which explains the areas that it will be under the demise of the residential properties, areas that will be in the demise of the companies for the flats, and the separate areas which are the public amenity areas. This relates back to the need to retain the access, for example, to the pumping station for the Basingstoke Canal, things like that. So we've got a plan that shows how those areas will be designated in the future.
You might want to make a note of the condition, which I think we will be looking to see. Councillor Tapper, then Councillor Whitcroft, and then Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Tapper, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the administration monitoring enforcement of the access from the back gardens for those residents who need to use that access for putting the bins out for collection. I assume that all of the properties on this development will be leasehold. Can I assume also, therefore, that the communication routes, the alleyways between the backs of the back gardens will remain under the ownership of the developer, and that it will be the management company's responsibility to make sure that the use of these alleyways is not abused? We have an enormous problem on Heatherside where a very similar approach is adopted to handling refuse bins of houses which have no access to the front directly through their property, with other residents using these alleyways literally to park their wheelie bins on a permanent basis, and even to abandon stuff which eventually will be taken presumably to the tip, but for some reason or other and never seems ever to be so. Can we assume that there will be some condition within the lease of all of these properties that these alleyways must never ever be used for these purposes, and that enforcement will be carried out to ensure that that is the case? Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come in at this point and ensure that we're asking the speaker planning-related questions? Some of these questions about the lease and the management side of things are things that we can't really control it under the planning system. It is a normal expectation on modern developments of this size that you will have a management company in place. And I think we just need to be careful that the questions we're actually asking the speaker are planning-related rather than those that we don't have control over as a planning authority. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Tapper.
Yes, I would say that the answer to this question is very much a planning matter. If no assurances can be given on this, then the plan is defective and all of the properties need to be provided with access to the front of the properties, which are entirely under their control. So I would conjecture that this is most definitely a planning issue. Thank you.
Mr. Gilchrist, can I just get another couple of questions and then maybe ask you to come in on some of these, please?
Sure.
And Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. I wonder, please, if the applicant might be able to shed a little bit of light on the environmental aspect of the development, please. As everybody is aware, this is high up on the council's priorities at the moment, and as we see developments go through, this is, as I say, something that's on our minds. Having looked at it, in addition to Councillor Tapper's comments, also the recommendations have come, the planning recommendations have been changed of recent, and quite a few different climate and environmental issues have been added. I wonder, please, if the developer might be able to explain and elaborate on what they intend to do on this development, please.
And finally, Councillor Mansfield, and then we'll ask Mr. Gilchrist to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really echo the comments that were made by Councillor Tapper and Councillor White. I'm extremely concerned about the management company having past experience of these things. And let's be honest, these are leasehold houses, they won't be freehold houses. I'm also extremely disappointed the affordable housing has been dropped from 56 to 15. But my point I'd also like to back up on is, can you tell me what the accommodation is going to be for electric vehicles on this brand new estate, please?
Right, Mr. Gilchrist, and then Mr. Carty, you can come in as well. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of, I think it was Councillor Tapper's point on the rear access, the houses will be sold as freehold, so the apartments will be leasehold, but the actual houses and their gardens will be freehold, and the rear access routes will be retained by the management company, and it will be enforced that they're not allowed, residents are not allowed to dump any waste or anything in those areas. We also will set it out in the transfer of the houses what they can and can't do. So from a management point of view, I'm fairly, I'm comfortable that that's going to be addressed. Turning to the environmental sustainability point, we, as a developer, we look at a fabric first approach to make sure that the houses are as efficient as possible. We also are looking to provide on this development air source heat pumps and solar panels, and it is very much in our interest to try to save or try to reduce the CO2 using renewable technologies. Then I think, sorry, I think the last point in terms of, sorry, can you remind me what the last point was? I didn't quite get it.
It was the point I raised regarding the charging points for electric cars.
Oh, charging. Sorry, yes, thank you for that. There is car charging, electric car charging for us is very important. I think policy condition 9 of the recommendation sets out that the intentions that we're going to provide charging for every single house. Where houses have drives and garages, we we provide an electric point to the drive to the garage, and the idea is that the residents can connect a charging point to the wall and charge their electric cars. But we don't, at the moment, we don't fit the actual charging point ourselves, because there are so many different types of electric cars, and different cars require different charging. And so we work with residents to try to make sure that they can fit whatever charging point they need to their property. And we also provide, for the apartment car parks, we'll provide charging posts which can serve probably about 2 or 3 cars, to try to make sure that each of the parked cars in the car park are available for electric vehicle charging.
Councillor Whitcroft next.
Just to pick that final point up, could you tell us, please, if there are 160 houses on the proposed development, could you tell us exactly how many charging points there will be, please?
Well, according to the condition, we've got to provide charging points for every single property. And we've got to submit a scheme to the local authority to confirm what we're doing.
I'll bring in Mr. Carty here, please.
Just to give you a bit of background, against the standards, the guidance, the parking guidance from Surrey, currently there's a requirement to provide 1 charging socket per house, and 20%, so that's 100% provision, and 20% provision for flats. Council are requesting a higher than their standard now, to go for 1 per unit, and they could insist, the developer could have insisted to go back to what the guidance is, but they've agreed that to provide it 1 per property, which is higher than the current guidance.
I see you, Councillor Tapper, but Councillor White is next.
If Councillor Tapper's is to do with this, then this subject, then I'll let him go first, because I've got a different question.
Go on, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to correct Mr. Gilchrist's misapprehension about charging points. In fact, virtually all home chargers are provided with a Type 2 connection on the box itself, and it is the lead that comes from the box to the car which adapts that to the car itself. So it'll be Type 2 at one end and Chadmo at the other for a Nissan Leaf, or Type 2 and Tesla at the other end for a Tesla car. So there is in fact no embargo whatsoever on the development company installing chargers as part of the development itself, and it would still enable any mark of car using any type of connection to connect to that particular charger. It would be recommended that they do so, because it would be far cheaper for them to install those chargers as part of the development rather than to have them retrofitted by the owners at a later date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'm sure Mr. Gilchrist will take that on board. Mr. Carty.
Just very quickly, embedded into that condition is the requirements that the minimum requirements at the moment is for a Type 2 connector, as expressed by Councillor Tapper there. So that's currently the minimum requirements, and I imagine over time, if those requirements go up, then the scheme will have to reflect that. But the current minimum requirements is for a Type 2 connector.
Thank you. Councillor White.
My question is something entirely different. Due to the close proximity to the local railway line, what safety precautions will be put in place, i.e. fencing, and also would there be any acoustic fencing being put in?
Mr. Gilchrist.
There will be fencing along the entire length of the railway line, both on the northern and western boundary of the scheme. The noise report that was submitted, I think that the noise report was looking more at acoustic ventilation, acoustic glazing for the houses, and some acoustic barrier fencing as well for the gardens. So in answer to your questions, yes, there will be acoustic fencing, and there will be ensure that there'll be no public access to the railway lines.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is going to be a question that's answered by the officers or the applicant. Width of the parking spaces and the length of the parking spaces, in particular with those front and back parking spaces for a variety of properties that are on the plans.
Mr. Gilchrist, Mr. Carty, who wants that one?
I think our general parking spaces are 2.5 metres by 5 metres. The parking space which is in front of the garage is longer than that to leave enough room for the garage door to be opened. The parallel parking spaces which are on the street, I believe, are 6 metres long to enable manoeuvring, and I think are still 2.5 metres as well. And the garages are 6 metres by 3 metres.
Mr. Carty has his rule out checking that for you. Duncan, you switched on.
Yeah, that looks about right in terms of the parallel parking with the 6 metre length to get that ease of access into those spaces. The length of the spaces that are on the drives are 5 metres, and then the garage is that greater depth. It's about 6 by 3. I've had to try and measure and take out the walls.
Right, I'm going to ask... Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, do you want to come back in?
Thank you. I was going to say, it looks like that is of a size in some cases, but not all. So in particular, the parking spaces for 76, 77, 78 and 79 look narrower than the parking spaces that are associated, but I appreciate this is an indicative plan. And then it's the width, so 87 and 88, where we've got very much that front and back parking. What you're saying then is they are 10 metres long to get the two houses in, and there is sufficient distance to open doors because of the green, presumably low-length hedge between the two of them. It just looks real. I mean, I'm not, as I think I've made clear in other planning applications, I don't like that 2 parking spaces side by side being counted as 2 parking spaces, because it isn't. You're going to park on the road, but are they?
Yeah, they are. And what you see on the plan is that they've dotted the 10 metre distance. And for example, on plot 86, there's space in front of the garage and also at the other end. So you've probably got extra. Yeah, they also have those extra distances. I'll just measure them again. Yeah, that's about 10 metres. Yeah.
Councillor Wheeler, can you switch yourself on so we can... Thank you.
They meet those requirements, yes. Yeah. But 87 is slightly shorter than the one I was looking at, 86, but you've still got a couple of metres give on that length of driveway.
Right, thank you for that. I have a question. It's going to sound very harsh, but it can either be for Mr. Gilchrist, Mr. Carty or Mr. Molyneux. We are promised 15 affordable homes. We won't go into detail the nature of affordable. How do we ensure that is what is delivered at the end of the day? As a minimum, I would stress. Who wants to pick that one up?
I can start that, and then if you want more detail, you may need to go back to Mr. Molyneux. And I think it's right to there's 2 prongs to this that I need to come back to you on. Sorry, the legal agreement would set out the required 15 units, and the review mechanism will allow retesting to see if more affordable housing could be provided at that time prior to commencement. No reduction would be expected through the process. So that's one prong of that argument. The second one is regards to the rights to come back to this council for a number of matters, which they can do. There is a right for all developments to request a review of any legal agreements after they have been completed, and any permission issued, such as in the light of any such change, any change in the viability position. This would then be reviewed with the assistance of the council's viability advisors at that time.
and that is a matter, reserved matter, that would come back to this committee. It can be, it is requested. Yes, take it. We'll agree that. Yes, I have agreement on that. I'm going to put you on the spot, Mr. Gilchrist. Are you making a positive statement that we will receive a minimum of 15 affordable homes?
Yes. The planning agreement in this, the Section 106 agreement for this development will include 15 affordable homes. And as Mr. Carty pointed out, the review mechanism can increase that.
I was going to add in the words as a minimum, but just tack that on. Mr. Carty.
Just to add an extra point with regards to that, the likelihood is this will be started. I think Mr. Gilchrist could confirm this, but as far as I'm aware, the likelihood is this will come forward sooner rather than later. So in the time period, there probably won't be much time to sort of see any significant change in the viability position anyway.
I asked the question. No, sorry, yes, Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. Would you be able to tell us, please, how many of the 160 homes have heat pumps and how many of the 160 homes have solar panels, please?
Is that one for me?
I think so. I didn't quite hear the question, actually. So, how many? Would you mind repeating that, please?
Yes, could you tell us, please, how many of the homes have solar panels and how many of the homes have heat pumps?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information to hand this evening, but I can confirm it.
Yeah, it's not really going to work after the meeting. Mr. Partington, do you want to?
Well, all I can do is direct members to page 39, Other Matters, paragraph 711(2, which does talk about the energy statement, but that talks more about energy efficiencies, including a fabric-first approach to reduce heat losses from the building and renewable energy measures for the roof of the proposed flat buildings and water efficiency measures.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking for reassurance on this. I'm sure it does, but could I have assurance, please, that all of the houses, including the flats, where are they? Where it's got very diddy amenity space, meet our flats 21 to 31 with a very small shared private amenity area, meet our desired minimum standards for recreational space in all cases, please.
The standard set out in 8.6, principle 8.6 of the RDG, requires a minimum of 1.5 metres deep for, sorry, that's for 3 metres deep. And I'll measure it, but I'm pretty sure it exceeds that.
Actually, can I just come in here? Is this a question for the Speaker? Because I think we keep wandering off the... It's an either-or, I know, accept that. Yeah, it is an either-or, but just trying to keep, if possible, on the straight and narrow for the Speaker, if possible.
Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, either or, it is, but the shared private amenity area for flats 21 to 31.
It meets, it exceeds the minimum requirement.
Okay, I think we've been quite gentle with Mr. Gilchrist, asked him 1 or 2 questions. If there are no other questions for Mr. Gilchrist, we will say thank you very much indeed for your presentation and responses, at which stage I will then open the rest of the meeting to, if there are any questions for Mr. Molyneux. Mr. Scott, yes? Right, thank you very much. I can't see me. Councillor Mulvanigan, sorry, I haven't seen you on my screen. Can I just make the point that you are at liberty to ask a question of the committee and the Speaker, certainly as a ward member in this instance, but you do not have a vote in the final outcome. Councillor Mulvanigan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm aware of it. Thank you for letting me speak today because, as most of you know, I'm the ward councillor and also I'm very passionate about affordable housing. I'm very disappointed to see instead of providing 56 houses, the calculations have come to only 15. And Chair, you beat me to it because I would like to have had the same assurance from the developer that they would give them minimum 15 because as I understand it, as the development carries on, they tend to come back and negotiate things downwards rather than upwards. So this is something which I think the committee should seriously consider as putting in as a very, very firm, extremely firm condition in there, only upward renewal, not downward renewal. Secondly, rabbit hatches, that's the word I would use. I have been involved, I've looked at this plan from the very beginning.
Councillor Mark Brannigan, sorry, can I just stop you there? I will let you come in. Is this a question to Mr. Gilchrist, or is it a general statement you wish to make to the committee?
I want to make the statement to the committee and to Mr. Milner as well, because I would like his assurance so that the committee can take this into account when voting.
So as far as the affordable homes, Mr. Carty, we have covered that, and it is covered in the section 106, which is a legal agreement. If certainly your first phase, can I ask you to give a direct question to the speaker, and then I'll let you come back and make a statement to the committee if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So my question to the speaker is: I do understand it's covered under the agreement, but can you confirm that it will be only upward renewal or increase in affordable housing and not downward? Because the tradition has been, as I've been told, this when the developer comes back, it's always a downward renewal of the affordable housing, because we need 56, not 15.
Mr. Gilchrist, would you like to come in on that one, please?
Absolutely, thank you. As we've set out earlier, the scheme will deliver 15 affordable homes. Mr. Carty quite rightly pointed out that it's likely that the development of this site will begin sooner rather than later. So a review mechanism is not generally going to yield too much of a difference in the financial position from where we are now. The intention is that, I mean, we're not going to provide less than the 15 homes that we're committing to, and we can fix that in the Section 106 agreement. That's not a problem. So I'm more than happy to commit to that.
Yeah, thank you. The Section 106 agreement is in that basis. So on that basis, I will say thank you very much indeed. And now, Councillor Mal Vanagan, would you like to come back and make a statement to the committee then, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like the committee to consider two important points, which is actually the size of the buildings, and Councillor Wheeler very adequately spoke about and questioned the parking, because as we know, most of us are working from home, and this actually will cause severe stress and mental illness to the residents who will occupy it. So if in small spaces, the mental illness within our community could increase. So I'm very concerned about the size of these houses. Having looked at it, it looks extremely small. On the second point, or the last point, is actually on parking. I know that area reasonably well, and I've looked at the site myself, and also the plan. The parking is too little for the development. Or even if they have visitors, what would happen? I'm second guessing now. They would end up in the lodge. Which lodge is a parking which is provided by this council, and effectively they'll take up spaces for the people who want to use the lodge, Frimley Park Lodge, that is. So it is something, if there has to be parking restrictions put on the use of the Frimley Park Lodge because of the residents or their visitors, I think council will incur cost, and that's a cost I would very much like the committee to actually look at and request that from the developer. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, members, Councillor Betton.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Last night at the United Nations, the Prime Minister of the UK made a speech about it's time for the human race to grow up, that it's right to be green, and we have the technology and we have the choice, and we have to make those choices now. Having worked in environmental protection and health issues since 1974, I fully agree with what he said. And I think what we have to do from now is to consider the environmental implications of everything that we as a council approve, set out to do and achieve. It's time for developers to grow up. It's time for them to make environmentally sustainable developments that people can and want to live in. This development, to me, appears far too cramped for people to live in comfortably. The parking is going to be a nightmare. I live in an estate myself where 20 years ago, it was okay. Now, there are cars parked everywhere, and it's nowhere near as dense as this proposal. We heard about heat pumps, we heard about solar panels, but we don't know how many, and we don't know where, and we don't know how effective they are going to be if they're spread around the estate. Every single house should be receiving these benefits. The people who are going to live there should have space in which to breathe. And sticking 160 odd houses in this cramped space with a plan that looks more like Coronation Street than Surrey Heath is not, to me, the way to achieve a good future for the people of this borough. For that reason, I will not be supporting the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, I'd just like to make the point that if one was in any development to include larger rooms, more parking, solar panels, what have you, that will inevitably push up the cost of those buildings, which is completely contrary to what we're saying we want, more affordable housing. So there's a balancing act to be done here. And, you know, that's the reality of the situation. If we did half the things that have been suggested tonight, the prices of the houses would be up 100,000. That's not what we want. Just like to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I go back. I agree with what Councillor Betton and also Councillor Perry says. I think this is an extraordinary overdevelopment of the area. I still don't think, however, they've actually really gone into detail in answering the questions that were put by Councillor White and Councillor Whitcroft as regards the detail of the electric charging points for the cars, the solar panels and the heat pumps. To me, they just wouldn't be nailed down as to the actual detail. The other point I would make is that I don't feel there was a really satisfactory answer as to how it can drop from 56 in respect of the affordable housing to 15. And of course, you know, it's the understanding of what is meant by affordable housing. And I also think, and I'll finish here on this point, that there were so many points made as to the openness of these leasehold agreements and management companies. And we all know how they all turn out. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, I think you were next, were you?
I don't know, Chair. Thank you. I wasn't sort of watching too closely everyone else. I think And I know that your response is going to be that it's not fully adopted as part of the local plan, but it is still our residential design guide. And in that, one of the things that we go on and on about is that the parking should be softened and there should be enough space at the front of the buildings for that parking to be softened. And we don't have that in this development. I would be also interested to know is how we manage on-street parking, because if we don't have double yellow lines all the way around this development, we are going to have a lot of on-street parking. And I've driven into the plot at Bagshot. You can't use the pavements because people are up on the pavements because the roads are not wide enough for cars to park in the road and for people to get past. And I know that county standards are given and obviously emphasise a very high density, sustainable location, which Frimley Green isn't. I'm not sure of the bus services in Frimley Green. I'm also really worried that that little tiny plot for those flats is the sole amenity space, because looking at it, by the time you've got 10 chairs on it, it doesn't look to me as if you'd be able to get social distancing in. It's minute for 10 houses, for 10 flats. So I don't, to my mind, it's not following our own best practice. I reiterate the concerns that have been raised about the affordable housing. I haven't plotted it against the sun, but it looks to me as though we've just crammed as many in as possible. We've not looked at our active solar design principles that are in that design guide. I'm hoping that the officers are going to come and hit me about the head and ears and correct me on those points, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, can I just actually add one point on yours on any front pavers should be porous for water penetration through the into the aquifer and subsoil. Then it was Councillor Whitcroft. Yeah, I see you, and then Councillor Lewis. Councillor Whitcroft, you indicate you wish to speak.
Thank you. Those of you that know the area of Frimley Green and Mitchett will be aware that this development, this site, sits literally in the cusp between the two. Frimley Green and Mitchett are both villages, in the same way that we have, although we don't think of them so much as villages in the same sense as we do at the other end of the borough, they are still villages. But it's always been accepted and, I mean, for as long as I can remember, that site used to be Sooty's home once upon a time when I was a child. But it's always been a brownfield site. There's always been building on there of some sort. So local people in both of the villages accept that there's got to be something is going on there. And that's fine, because at the moment it is a bit of an eyesore. It needs something doing with it. However, just to kind of clarify where I'm at with it, I am concerned about picking up from Councillor Wheeler's points. There is no overflow of parking on that site or outside that site, with the exception of Frimley Lodge Park. And the problem with anyone who should use the overflow at the park, during the winter months, the park gates are closed at 4:30 and not opened again until 8:30 in the morning. So the question then comes, literally the barriers go down and you cannot get in or out of the park. So at that point, there is no overflow at all, because there's no prospect of parking on Sturt Road itself. And there is going to be the estate parking issues, as Councillor Wheeler has described. So that is a major consideration as far as people and, what has been said. The other problem that local people have brought up is the flooding and that does come under the bridge and also comes on the road, Sturt Road again, outside Frimley Lodge Park, which as it stands at the moment often makes the road, one side of the road, completely impassable. So that's another sort of, another large concern that the residents have. There is, again, as other people have said, the principle of the 35% affordable housing, and we're looking here, our 15 is 9.4. Now, that's absolutely nowhere near, and I think that that should perhaps be looked at again. I think I am minded to ask for a deferral because there is an awful lot of information missing here, lots of unanswered questions, and I think we would be better equipped to answer those questions if some of our concerns were allayed by any further information that could be provided as we've asked.
Okay, Councillor Whitcroft, thank you for that. I'll come back to you, but Councillor Lewis indicated you wish to speak, and Councillor Tapper also indicated, and then I'm going to call a halt because I want to come back to Councillor Whitcroft's point, if you don't mind. Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the highway conditions on page 51, mostly number 2, where it says there's going to be 2 informal crossings. This development is going to attract young families. There's going to be a lot of children. You've got a fantastic park the other side of Sturt Road. I think you need something a bit more meaty. Personally, safety's sake, I would like a pedestrian control crossing, but I think at the very least you need some form of formal crossing there. Thank you.
It's in the updates. County said it wasn't necessary.
Oh, thank you on that. I hear what you say. Councillor Tapper, have you got a fresh point?
Yes, actually, I have 2. First is about the heating. My estimation of the amount of the cost to install air source heat pumps to every property there is around about £1 million out of this development. I would like Mr. Gilchrist to take away a proposal that they look into the opportunity of an alternative of vertical board ground source heat pumps, which I reckon would cost around about half or less of that price, with a district heating scheme to provide heat to these properties. That would improve their profitability of the development, and I feel it would be a more suitable solution. My question, however, is how we can consider, and this is on page 36 of the proposal here, 772, how we can possibly consider what is being put forward as the appropriate SANGs for this development as the ones which are actually shown here, Hawley Park Farm and Bramshot Farm. If you've taken the time to look on the map of where these are actually located, they are miles away. There is no easy way of anyone on this development even walking to these sites. The only way that you could actually get to them is to go to the hatches and across the Blackwater Valley and the railway lines that way. That is the only way that you could access these SANGs on foot. And I think each one is probably 2.5, 3 miles away. This does not comply with the requirement for SANGs to be a close amenity provision to the development which would satisfy the whole purpose of providing it for this particular development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Carty, and then I'm going to come back to Councillor Whitcroft.
Just on the matter of SANG, each SANG has its own catchment area. Hart have informed us that these developments are within the catchment of the SANG. What the SANG will do is not just attract the people from this development, but it will attract people elsewhere that will balance up with this. So it's not just about the people that go there, but the wider. That's the principle of SANG delivery, but it is within the catchment of those 2 SANGs.
Right, thank you for that. Okay, this has had a good airing, I think it's safe to say. And firstly, I thank the various speakers. There are a number of unanswered questions here relating to the ground pumps, the parking layout, the landscaping, solar panel, the whole range. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. So I think I'm going to pick up Councillor Whitcroft's point on this one. And if Councillor Whitcroft is making a recommendation to the committee for this item be deferred for further discussion between the applicants and the officers, I would like to second that, if I may, and put that to the committee that we defer this for further investigation and consideration on the points made. That is a recommendation, Council members. Are we in agreement with that recommendation? Right, thank you, Mr. Scott, for keeping us on the straight and narrow. Right, feel free. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. It's back to amenity space and our own design standards, which says that...
Sorry, say it again.
It's back to amenity space and our own design guide, which says that each flat should have if it's a ground floor flat, it should have 1.45 metres of its own space.
Not too much detail. Can we just do the headline, please?
Yeah.
Amenity
space related to the flatted developments.
Right. So we're going for amenity value on the accommodation. I would like to put in on the size of accommodation, picking up one of your earlier points. We have the provision of the car parking, the provision of heat pumps and solar or sustainable power. Can we wrap it up on that? The sustainable power. Are there any other points you'd like to suggest, members? I think that covers. Councillor Betton.
Just too many houses on such a small area, in my opinion.
Density. We'll put in density and to look at that. Although, you know, Mr. Carty.
I better just say that with the scheme, it doesn't allow us to go back and get a reduced scheme.
Right. Thank you. Of course it doesn't. We should know that. It is we're looking at it, but it's the unanswered questions that we can deal with. So those are the questions. Mr. Scott, are you content on that? Yeah. Yep. Right. Members, can I just indicate, are you all in agreement that this matter is deferred for further investigation and come back to this committee? That is unanimous. Just for there's no objection to that, I take it. I think I've counted everybody. That is it. Thank you very much. Speakers, or various speakers, thank you very much indeed for joining us in your forbearance on an interesting and quite extensive debate. I would say thank you very much indeed. And we may well see some of you again. I'm pretty sure we will. Thank you very much indeed to that. Councillor Mansfield did declare that he had to rush off for another meeting. He hasn't disappeared on that. So we go to the second item on page 73, Bagshot Retail Park. And sorry, can I firstly go back onto the last item? Can we please have on the agenda the name of the applicant when we get to the next agenda? I just thought I'd make that point. And I think the same comment applies to this next item, land at Bagshot Retail Park on page 73. I note the applicant as care of agent, so we can deal with that one. On declarations, I think we've all received a letter from the agent for the adjoining retailer, and I've been copied in on a letter to Councillor White from a local resident, and I don't know how far that went in terms of distribution. Councillor Wheeler, you've had that. Are there any other declarations to make on this one, members? Councillor White.
I had a phone call yesterday afternoon from the manager of Waitrose to make sure that I had received their communication as well.
Thank you for that. No other declarations. Mr. Carty, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the Bagshot Retail Park and principally relates to the 2 retail units. Am I too early?
Somehow we've lost connection to it.
Okay. I've looked at it.
It might have just timed out.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the Bagshot Retail Park and principally relates to the 2 retail units currently occupied by Pets at Home and Cotswold Outdoor. The proposal also relates to corresponding works within the wider retail park, that is the service yard and car park. The Proposal is to amalgamate the retail units and allow a food retailer, Lidl, to operate from the combined units. The proposal has been assessed on its impact on the viability and vitality of all defined local centres, and it has been considered acceptable in this regard. Please note the update. Also, please note that a further objection has been received since the publication of the update, but this objection, which with the exception of the impact on air pollution and the climate emergency, does not raise any new issues. I will lead you through the drawings and photos. This is the application site, which includes the retail units to be amalgamated on the west side of the building, the left-hand side of the building. Service yard at the back, and the car park, which is in two parts, split by Waters Way, which runs through the middle. Yeah, sure. Yeah. The other units within the retail park are Waitrose and the small unit Subway, which are not affected by the proposal. The A30 lies at the bottom of the image, with Earlswood Park, a residential development, to the top left. The Earlswood Sang is to the rear and to the right-hand side of this image. This is the existing layout for the site, including the car park and servicing arrangements. The Waitrose unit is located on the right-hand side. And the Subway is located in the opposite corner. This is the proposed layout, which shows the amalgamated unit to the left-hand side of the Waitrose store. The main changes are to the car park by providing a trolley park in front of the unit. Parking spaces are reconfigured, which has resulted in an overall loss of 6 spaces. However, increases in disabled and parent and child spaces are to be provided to improve accessibility. Those are the revamped layout for the disabled spaces, and the parent and child spaces are here. And these will provide improved accessibility. The proposal would result in the loss of 3 trees, which are the circles in the car park, becoming parking spaces to offset the loss around the car park. But it's considered that trees could be provided elsewhere in the car park area by condition. This is the existing layout as set out for Cotswold Outdoor. On the left-hand side, is the ground floor layout, and the first floor is to the right. And Cotswold Outdoor has some retail sales area on the first floor mezzanine. These are the proposed floor plans for the Lidl retail unit. And this includes some reduction in the mezzanine floor space, with the retail sales area being wholly on the ground floor. The overall reduction in floor space is 662 square metres, reducing from 2,432 to 1,770 square metres for that unit. The net retail sales area is 1,019 square metres. These are the front and rear elevations, and it is the left-hand half of the building that will be converted, with the exception of the subway, and at the back, the rear. They haven't shown the sweep, the roof sweep of the whole building. They've only showed a portion of the Waitrose unit in the front and rear elevations. The main changes are to do with the removal of the extra door access, because they only need one door access rather than 2 separate door accesses now, and some obscure glazing screening to some of them. So there'll be some glass window where the doors were, but they'll be losing some within the unit there. At the rear, you'll see the aircon units and that kit required for Lidl. There is some accommodation, which I'll come on to in the photos in a minute, at the moment there, in roughly in the same location. Here is the front of the retail park, as viewed from the edge of the car park, looking back, and that's the rear that shows the existing aircon units in that rear service yard. The current proposal has been assessed by the Council's retail advisor, and who raised no objections subject to clarification on some retail matters which have now been provided by the applicant. It needs to be acknowledged that the proposal falls below the threshold for a retail impact assessment, but this has been provided at the officer's request. Retail impact has to be severe to warrant refusing on this ground. The proposal would not have any adverse retail impact upon any defined centre or any planned investment in such centres. In addition, the proposal passed the sequential test, with the only unit under question being the former BHS unit in Camberley, which is now due to be occupied by a different operator. The proposal would not have any adverse effect on highway safety, even with the expected increase in traffic generation associated with the proposal when compared with the existing retail uses. The parking provision meets the parking guidance and no parking overspill at the busiest times is envisaged. The County Highway Authority has requested a £50,000 contribution towards improvement to the traffic light systems at the Waterers Way and Yavelins Drive road junctions with the A30 London Road. It's considered in the officer's opinion that this requirement would meet the planning obligations tests set out in the MPPF. These traffic light systems use out-of-date systems which are not compatible with each other or other county traffic light junctions. They do not sync, and this has caused a local highway issue. This improvement will assist in the flow of traffic, including the increased traffic flow to the site on the A30. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the securing of this contribution towards the traffic light improvements as set out on page 85 of the agenda report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carty. We have a speaker, Mr. Fox, speaking in support of the application. Mr. Fox, are you with us?
I am, yes, Chair. Thank you for your time this evening, members of the Planning Committee. My name is Adrian Fox. I'm the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, Nottinghamshire County Council. We've worked closely and collaboratively with the officer since May 2020 in the consideration of planning application before you this evening, and we fully endorse the officer's recommendation to resolve to grant plan permission to enable Lidl to trade from existing floor space at Bagshot Retail Park. The application site comprises a well-established retail destination in Bagshot, with the principle of food retailing established through the existing Waitrose. However, there is significant uncertainty regarding the long-term prospects of the existing tenants, Cotswold Outdoor and Pets at Home. As such, there is a serious threat that the retail park could become largely vacant, resulting in job losses. Lidl has a long-standing requirement to strengthen their existing representation in the local area, and specifically to provide a store to serve the Bagshot Lightwater area. There is currently no discount food retailer represented in Bagshot or Lightwater. The new store will complement Lidl's existing offering Camberley and Blackwater, which will be retained alongside the proposal. As well as improving choice for residents, once open, the new store will deliver approximately 40 jobs. The application proposal is extremely modest in nature, insofar that it largely relates to reoccupation of existing retail floor space. In fact, the proposals result in a net reduction of floor space of more than 660 square metres. In planning policy terms, all relevant matters have been fully addressed and satisfied. In terms of the principle of allowing further food retailing in this location, it has been demonstrated that the proposal fully accords with relevant retail planning policy. No alternative site exists and is available and suitable to accommodate the proposed development, as acknowledged by officers and the Council's retail planning advisors. This includes a former BHS unit in Camberley Town Centre. Notwithstanding the fact that Camberley is not the same catchment as Bagshot, the former BHS unit is unsuitable for food store operators for several reasons, as has been demonstrated for the comprehensive evidence submitted to the Council. These include unsuitable layout and configuration, lack of immediately adjacent at-grade customer car parking, and lack of appropriate service arrangements. In terms of the likely trading effects of the proposal, it is important to stress that due to the scale of the development, there is no planning policy requirement for an impact assessment to be undertaken in support of the proposal. Again, this has been acknowledged by officers. However, as part of working collaboratively with the Council and to assist officers, a proportionate impact assessment was undertaken. This has demonstrated that the proposal will not lead to a significant adverse impact, the policy test, on planned investment or the long-term vitality and viability of any nearby defined centre. This includes Camberley, Bagshot and Lightwater. The proposal fully accords with relevant retail planning policy. All other planning matters have been fully addressed, including design, residential amenity and highways. In addition, following a leaflet being distributed to some 7,800 properties earlier this year, almost 2,000 replies were received, with approximately 75% indicating they are supportive of the principle of a new Lidl store in Bagshot. Respondents highlighted several benefits associated with the proposals. These included improved local choice, affordable prices and job creation. To conclude, the proposals will secure the long-term occupancy of existing retail floor space, retaining and creating jobs in the local area. Further jobs will also be created through the fit out of the store. A Lidl store will A Lidl store in Bagshot will increase consumer choice locally and improve residents' accessibility to discounted convenience goods. There is also substantial community support for the proposals. Thank you for your time this evening, and I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any planning-related questions for the Speaker? Councillor White.
I have quite a few questions, Chairman, so I hope you'll forgive me. First of all, could I ask the Speaker, why is there a need to increase the opening hours when we fought long and hard to get the opening hours that we have now with Waitrose because of the close proximity of the residential area? I think the extended opening hours will only cause distress to the residents. That's my first question. I don't know how to put this. I was speaking to a Lidl employee today from Blackwater who advised me that they are not allowed to park on site. Could you please confirm that the 40 plus staff will be allowed to park on site and not in adjoining roads of the adjoining estate and other small areas? They certainly can't park on the A30. We know that. Also, how many deliveries a day will there be? Waitrose currently have 5 a day, which are quite well choreographed. They go in a forward manner, they come out in a forward manner. The changes in the back area, the loading area by Lidl, look as if they will compromise this turning area. And also, I believe at Blackwater there are car parking charges. Do you intend to incur car parking charges at this place? Also, sorry, just brought one more question to mind. Who has the overall rights of the car park? Is it Waitrose? Is it Lidl? Would you have joint rights? And who has the last say as what happens in the car park? Thank you.
Right. Mr. Fox.
There's a few questions. I'll try and answer them the best I can. In terms of the opening hours, the extension and servicing hours, that's just reflective of what customers require. Because people, it's only a modest widening, but we're just looking for a slight increase to suit the customer's requirements. The impact of the wider hours has been fully tested as part of the application and deemed acceptable by Environmental Protection Officer and the officers within the council. So it's raised no issue. That's been fully addressed. In terms of staff parking, one of the conditions is a travel plan will be submitted and agreed prior to store opening. So that will set out details of measures to encourage staff and to use other forms of transport to visit the place of work. But the intention is to make sure there's more than sufficient parking for customers. So we'll make sure that there'll be plenty of parking available. Just for worth pointing out as well, I'm actually here on behalf of the landlord rather than the operator. So the specific sort of controls of staff will be something dealt with by Lidl themselves. But as I said, there is a condition setting out the need for a travel plan, setting out sort of sustainability measures of the store. In terms of deliveries, again, there's a condition proposed where a service delivery plan will have to be agreed in writing prior to store opening, so that will all be agreed in writing with officers at the council. In terms of who has overall control, that will be the landlord has overall control in terms of the use. The leaseholders, the existing leaseholders and the future leaseholders will then be subject to the controls from the landlord, which in this currently is Nottinghamshire County Council. Hopefully that's addressed all your questions. I think the main point is that a lot of these will be addressed through discharging the various conditions, the servicing plan, the travel plan, but hopefully that's addressed your questions.
Yes, Councillor White, to come back in.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear you rightly that you're not here on behalf of Lidl, you're here on behalf of the landlords?
That's correct, yes. The applicant is Nottinghamshire County Council, who are the landlord, and they've submitted the application. Heads of terms have been agreed with Lidl, who, subject to planning be approved, would be the end occupier of the unit, but they are not the applicant. The landlord is the applicant.
So, sorry, can I just come in, clarify that you're not, obviously you're not Lidl, I mean, you're not County Council, I don't know if you're the superannuation fund or you're Nottingham or what, but so you submitted the application, but you're not in a position to advise on how you as the landlords have reached agreement with your tenant on car parking and green travel plan and how they will deal with car parking. Is that correct?
It's correct to a certain degree. What will happen is Lidl, in conjunction with the landlord, it's Nottinghamshire County Council care of Aberdeen Asset Management, who are our clients, who are the applicants. They'll agree when we discharge the conditions in terms of travel plan and servicing plan. It'd be a relatively standard Lidl submission where they do throughout the country. This
Evie.
Sorry.
Don't know what happened there. Councillor White again, please.
Seem to be setting a trend for this request tonight, but could we have a deferment so that we can have a conversation with Lidl as a planning committee as to what they're actually going to do on the site?
I wouldn't say that's reasonable, unfortunately, because actually the applicant is the applicant. They're Mr. Fox is representing the applicant tonight, and it really wouldn't be reasonable for us to ask for a deferment for those reasons.
But he can't answer the questions that we're asking as a planning committee.
So can I just interject there? In terms of this application, this is common throughout the UK. I think Waitrose is similar. Waitrose weren't the applicant for the original application, and throughout the country, landlords will be submitting applications and the agreement for lease is subject to obtaining planning. So Lidl will not proceed unless we get planning permission for the store. And in terms of what Lidl plan to do, that will all be agreed through to the discharging conditions in terms of travel plan and servicing arrangements, which will be agreed with the officers, the local authority. So I don't think there's any need to defer because the information we provided will all be agreed as part of this application through the discharge of conditions.
Yeah, in terms of the expectations of the servicing plan, now we're aware of the letter that came in from Waitrose, and Waitrose, their service yard is through this service yard. So it's appreciated the sensitivity of getting it right for them, so that they're not hindered by what happens in the service yard at the rear of this unit. The details to comply now, the way that those applications are proceeding, and sorry, if, I'm sure you all know this, but just for the record, they are now formal applications. We are able to, we've had emails from Waitrose anyway, to keep them in touch with those details so they can comment on those details when they come in, and we can work with them to resolve any outstanding matters between those two operators in terms of the way the servicing will work.
So just to come in again, so it's just important to bear in mind that Waitrose are obviously a tenant of the landlords, and it's in our interest to make sure they're happy as well. So any servicing arrangements for Lidl will also make sure we won't compromise Waitrose. I know that Waitrose objection was quite late in the day, but having a quick look at that, it does not seem too unreasonable what they're suggesting in terms of any changes to condition or any servicing arrangements. But as I say, we're not just looking at this on behalf of Lidl, we're looking at this, the retail park as a whole, and we want the best sort of offer in terms of the retail park. We don't want to focus just on Lidl, we're looking at the retail park as a whole and be able to compromise the existing tenants we have in place.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, Waitrose or agents on behalf of Waitrose have come back, and they say that they, paraphrasing, they're not impressed with the rear car parking and the rear delivery access. And I remember when Waitrose, when the application first came to us, we were promised faithfully that knockcuts were coming back. Didn't happen, and Waitrose were talking about having a necessary need for extra storage, notwithstanding their depot was down the road, and they didn't seem to do any JIT servicing. But they have asked that they be included in any discussions on Condition 6. And I think that that would be a requirement of this committee. I'll just mention those points, and I'm going to bring in Councillor Gordon now, please.
Hi, I've got 3 questions, please. First of all, in one of the recommendations, it says this work must start within 3 years of the agreement. What's the current lease left on Pets at Home and Cotswolds, please? Do we know that?
That's not a planning question, Councillor Gordon.
Okay, fair enough. Second question is on the service agreement. As Councillor White stated, Waitrose currently have 5 deliveries a day. Are Lidl prepared to work around that so the deliveries don't clash? Do we know that at all?
This will come out with the service plan details. That's the sort of details that we'll be looking into with the applicant when it comes in to see that it works. And by making direct contact with Waitrose, we can work with them to resolve any matters on that.
And my third question is, for a long while now, Surrey County Council and Highways have exclaimed that the lights at Waters Way and Yetherton Drive are perfectly correct and have been fixed, and that's as good as you're going to get. They now turn around and said they're out of date and obsolete. So can we get some reassurance that this £50,000 is spent on doing that and the work does actually take place? Because they've now had a complete about-face from what they said for years and years and years. So I think I want some reassurance that that work will happen. Otherwise, the A30 will be worse and worse, and that seems to be the biggest concern so far for residents.
Ultimately, the delivery of those improvements are a matter for County Council. We want that payment made prior to commencement, and then we will have to pressurise the county to deliver. And they'll have to explain how they've delivered, because the need to have an audit trail of the costings for it and to make sure that all of that work is done and costed for, because the developer could come back to us and have it back.
Councillor Gordon, can I just explain why I stopped you on your first point? Because you were moving on to areas of commercial confidentiality potential, which is not a planning issue. On your point about the county highways, when I read that, I did think, how many years have we been told that the traffic lights are fit for purpose when the rest of us in this world, and I am, as you know, a county councillor, but I can still be critical of the county, did not believe one moment it was fit for purpose. I do understand that the contribution, whilst I personally would love to see a roundabout there, and I think most people would, the contribution is to continue the upgrading and the improvement of the traffic lights that we have evidenced and suffered traffic queues all the way along from the Jolly Farmer down through the A30, down to the Meadows, where the traffic light system is so much better, and it is for an upgrade, as I understand it, for those lights. But Mr. Carty is absolutely right. It is down to the applicant to ensure that the county carry out the works that they are promising to do.
I'd just add that obviously the reason why we've accepted that contribution is we feel that it's necessary for the development. It meets the obligation tests that are set out in the MPPF. So we couldn't ask for these things if we didn't feel that they were necessary and directly related to the development. In this particular case, we feel that those tests are passed.
That was the professional officer response, where mine wasn't. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. The officer made reference earlier about the removal of trees and that the applicant felt that they could be placed somewhere else, loosely paraphrasing what you said. Could we please make sure that with the final plan, we do have those trees replaced, ideally softening the view of the retail park a little bit from the road if possible. But I would certainly hope that the final location of those would come back to Chair, Vice Chair and ward members under consultation. Thank you.
This will come in as a details to comply application as requirements for condition 8. We don't at the moment have a procedure whereby the Chair and Vice Chair agree those details as a matter of course. At the moment they agreed, but certainly you, I don't know of any mechanism that
yeah, I'm trying to agree with Councillor Wheeler on that, because the my ears pricked up when I was told that trees were coming out, and I thought it's just going to be a mess, another car park, hardly attractive, hardly the edge of Bagshot. But then you see the pictures, and what's there ain't going to win any gold medals at Chelsea. But I would like to see something in there, and I think members are inclined to agree with on this one, that there is an attempt to soften the landscaping, to make it to reduce the impact of the car park that is already there. This is our opportunity to revisit that, if you like.
Yeah,
I make that suggestion.
Yeah, I was looking really that there are areas at the front of the site that you could accommodate. But we can talk about that outside. Yeah.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. I seem to remember when the original planning permission was given for this building, you say we expected all the pitch was that knock cuts were going to go back in there. I thought we made a very strong condition that the food element in that site should be no more than 50%. The others should be non-food and more garden centre type materials. Has that all gone by the way now? Because there was a lot of discussion about it at the time.
Sorry, Duncan, can you stop? Is this a question, we still have the speaker on, is this a question to the speaker or to the officers? Because I'd like to finish the questions to the speaker. Actually, I think I'll allow that one because it is a very pertinent one through to the asset management and the landlords. Yeah. And then if you can come back in. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what the landlord's response on that is. Thank you. Mr. Fox, are you still there? If you could respond.
Yeah, I'm still there, yes. Is that in terms of, yeah, the original consent was a Waitrose and not Cuts Garden Centre, but over time that's been sort of amended originally for Cotswold Outdoor and Pets at Home. And then this application now, because of the change in the retail market, there's less demand. And so we're looking for this application now to broaden the condition to allow food from the Cotswold and Pets at Home unit. Otherwise, there's a risk that it could become vacant.
Just to add some of the background to the history, because I've dealt with the sites since that original proposal. Councillor Perry, you might recall that from many years ago. The original issue with the development was less with Waitrose, but more with that second unit and making sure that it didn't harm Canby Town Centre. So it was the limitations on the comparison element, the comparison goods element of that, and there were fairly restrictive conditions on how they were to operate. We know now, subsequently, they didn't occupy, and it came forward with Cotswold Outdoor and Pets at Home. So that aspect was also tested in the same way because they were comparison goods, and they had more of a direct impact on on Canby Town Centre. And with the limitations that we set out, we realised that there wasn't that harm through that testing. Because this is a food retailer, it has less impact on Canby Town Centre, and it's been shown and proven that what they're looking at, the catchment for this is really in the more localised Bagshot area, not so much in Camberley. So it had less impact on that. What we were then looking at is the impact, the wider impact on the Bagshot Centre and also Lightwater. And that's where the main focus of the impact assessment was done this time around. So it is a different argument to what was dealt with previously.
Okay. Right, I understand Councillor Malbanigan wishes to speak on this. Same comments as earlier on, Councillor. If you would like to address the committee, please.
Thank you,
Actually,
Chair.
sorry, before you go any further, is it a question to the Speaker? Because I'm going to let him go.
No, it's not. It's not for the Speaker. It's for the officers.
Right. Well, don't go away. Councillor White, a question to the Speaker?
It is a question for the Speaker, and it's a bit off target, so I hope you allow me.
I'll tell you.
So although it's not a planning consideration, the loss of the vet surgery with the pets at home will be taken hard in the village and the surrounding villages. No vets are taking any new clients at the moment. Perhaps the applicant could talk to Lidl and in some way ask them to incorporate the veterinary part that is already there on the mezzanine site within, I know it's food and I know it's pets, but it's separate, but incorporate it in some way. It's going to be a big loss to Bagshot.
I'm not going there on that one, but yes, you're right. It is not a planning consideration.
I'm happy to answer that question because just from the landlord perspective, we are looking at opportunities to retain the vet's use because that is a viable and there is local need for that use. So we are currently looking at options. And it may well be we'll be submitting an application in the near future because we do recognise that is an important local facility. I think it'd be difficult to locate it within the Lidl store, but we are looking within the retail park as an opportunity for the vets elements, well, a vet to be provided on the retail park. So your point's fully noted and the landlord's fully aware of that anyway because of the market demand.
Thank you for that.
Just to say, I think it is in the report that in itself wouldn't have been a reason to refuse it, the loss of it. It's appreciated that it's a local use now, and I hear what they're saying, that they may be looking at a new proposal coming forward. But we wouldn't have been able to refuse it from that loss because it's an out-of-town location, location.
Right. Mr. Fox, I think we've asked all the questions of you, so thank you very much indeed that. You can obviously be delighted if you want to stay on for the rest of the debate, and I will then go to Councillor Malbanigan for him to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm just going to state something, a point which was made earlier, but like you, Chair, I also have been caught in the traffic jam from Windmill all the way down to the old roundabout near the town. It's a bit of a nightmare since Waitrose came with this new shop with Lidl coming in. It is welcome. I'm all for having retail. But I think the county has to look at this. I'm addressing the officer. The county has to look at this traffic system all the way from Windmill into the town centre because it does create such a havoc for the people, particularly coming after work, both ways. Secondly, I've also seen because with only Waitrose, the shoppers tend to park in the residence area as well on the pavements. So again, it's a parking issue. That's something the officers need to look at and come up with a solution for the residents living behind Waitrose as much as living on the outskirts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I must admit I'm not aware, and I haven't heard reports from other councillors of the shoppers parking in there. I mean, whenever the odd occasions, I go to Waitrose, and I stress odd. I've not had a problem with parking, and I occasionally park there to go across the road to a well-known coffee shop, which I can't mention to Councillor White. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that we are regular shoppers at Waitrose, and I have rarely seen the car park more than half full. I think the parking issue also needs to be taken into consideration, that the parking that would previously have been for Cotswold outdoors and pets at home would disappear. So that's a removal of parking requirement for those. I would also submit that a large number, if not the majority of people who currently shop at Waitrose will also be shopping at Lidl at the same time. And consequently, that will reduce the number of journeys, and it will mean that people who are parked up there are parked for two sets of shopping rather than two journeys being made to do the shopping. So From that point of view, I think the problem of parking on site has probably been oversold, and that I don't believe there will actually be a problem in practice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the clarity of that. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. I wonder, please, this one perhaps isn't a planning question, but could you tell us, please, will there be another application need to go through licensing?
We are independent of the licensing committee.
Yeah, the time. The reason I'm asking is because I was wondering, it says on here about the retail hours. What, and again, it refers to the policy document at the bottom, but is it why and what sets those opening hours? Are we able to condition them to be shortened back, cut back?
There is a proposed condition, which is condition 5, towards the bottom of page 85. It is within the remit of this committee to request amendments to that condition if they wish to. All I would stress is that the extra times are the extra public holidays. This would mean that the unit would be open at different hours or less hours than Waitrose.
I just find it a little bit surprising that in a retail park of this, in this area, particularly, I mean, it just seems to me that 7 o'clock until 11 o'clock, Monday to Saturday, in that kind of area is somewhat excessive, especially bearing in mind that there's residential right on the edge of that park. It's right there. It's not as if, you know, there's literally a small road between the two. So those hours, as I say, particularly up until 11 o'clock at night. And it also applies, I did see somewhere about the, underneath, the HGV delivery hours. Again, 11 o'clock at night for HGV delivery. I don't understand why that needs to be so late.
Councillor White, did you also want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Whitcroft said. The nearest house to where the access is for the HGVs to go in is about that far, a foot. And you've got a row of houses there that the lorries go past, and you can actually feel the rumbling of the lorries there. To have them going in at 11 o'clock at night, the last one to go in at 11 o'clock at night, is antisocial. It's antisocial behaviour on behalf of the applicants. I'm sorry, but this is a residential area that just happens to have had a retail park forced on it, where it was going to be a garden centre. These people bought their houses thinking they were going to live nice next door to a nice little garden centre, and now they live next door to a retail park with HGVs going in and out all day long. There's only 5 from Waitrose, but we don't know how many there's going to be with Lidl. I should imagine it would be a lot more. But every day that trundling past resident's door, I feel is totally unacceptable. And it's really at 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. I certainly wouldn't want it.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
I've got the original condition for the developments. 2 points, I think, 2 slightly different points raised about the hours. The hours of opening are from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night for the developments, and therefore that's what Waitrose use, those hours. A separate point regarding the HGV deliveries and the timing, and this may be something for you to consider through this, is that the current the approval for that is that the latest delivery should be completed by 9:30 at night, and then no deliveries before 7 o'clock the next morning. They've asked it for an extension to 11 o'clock, an hour and a half beyond that. That is something that was tested with Environmental Health, who said that that was acceptable for that unit, not for both, but for that unit. If you disagree with that advice that's been given to us and you want to, then that's something for you to request.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I think just coming back to the points that are made, I think having a restriction at 9:30, that presumably is the arrival time, or is that the time by which the lorry has to be unloaded and leave the site?
The wording is the latest HGV delivery shall be completed by 9:30 and thereafter no delivery shall take place until 7 o'clock on the following day. So it means that when we talk about completed, it's in, delivered and gone.
So
Okay.
Can I just come back and, sorry, jumping in there, Councillor Weir. So the original consent is 11 o'clock for the car parking.
Sorry, the 11 o'clock finish is for the hours of opening. The 9:30 finish is for HGV delivery, so it's an hour and a half before the unit closes.
If committee are agreeable, I think we should go back to that and say what was consented is consented.
Sure. Yeah.
And we should hold the line on the completed deliveries by 9:30, and the days of deliveries are?
There's no days specified, so it's all days. What I'd like to add, just to let you know, and it's a matter just for your information, is that if we were to amend the condition to reflect the approved, earlier, the originally approved hours for the HGV deliveries, they have the right to appeal that condition. But just thought I'd let you know.
That's fine, but what I was trying to get at is that 7 days a week. Yes. And personally, I think, Councillor White's absolutely right. Those houses are very close to the one delivery point, coming into two delivery points. And I personally would like to see a restriction. And I don't suppose we could do this, but I personally would like to see it finish at, I don't know, 2 o'clock on a Sunday or something to give quiet enjoyment to residents. Are we able, if the committee are agreeable, are we able to do that?
The difficulty you have with doing that is that you've got Waitrose being able to use the longer hours.
So the answer is no, we can't do it.
Well, I think that there's, yeah.
So come back to the point that we stick by the closed at 11 and in and out for deliveries by 9:30 in the evening.
What we can do is take over the wording of the original condition into the new development.
Yeah, so that's effectively condition 5.
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Morley.
Just to be pernickety, it's HGVs, so 7.5 tonne would be acceptable. Just thinking that a lot of supermarkets are having to change what's being driven, and I have, as my family says, an unhealthy interest in commercial vehicles, owning one. But exactly what size are we limiting?
I'm aware that there is the size of vehicle HGV that's mentioned in HGV is defined. It may be defined as the highways. I can't remember, but I know that there's a definition for the size of vehicle, and you're right, it is the bigger vehicles and doesn't stop the vans turning up. But it's for those heavier, noisier vehicles that the restriction's in place for.
Right. We're at a situation where there is an amendment proposed. Councillor Wheeler, White, Whitcroft, do you have the 3 Ws? Great cricketers, actually, the 3 Ws, if I remember rightly. Fresh points?
Could we just clarify, please, that if it doesn't start until 7 o'clock, that means that no vehicle can enter the site, i.e. they can't come in at 6 o'clock, idle, do nothing, and then not be unloaded till 7 o'clock. So there's that point there. The other thing is that having looked at the various sizes, Waitrose delivery lorries tend to be slightly smaller than the huge lorries that Lidl deliver with. Is there anything that we can do about that to try and encourage Lidl to... You don't want to encourage them so much that they have to make twice as many deliveries because you're using much smaller vehicles, but the lorries that they deliver in are enormous.
We can pick that issue up through the servicing plan requirements, so the details come in that way. That will be part of that work is how many deliveries, the size of deliveries that they need per day. So we can pick that up at that stage, and of course that will be out to public, notification, and of course we'll be liaising with Waitrose anyway. So that could be picked up through that process.
And the 7 o'clock bit?
Now that's trickier if they're idling in the bus stop, for example, because we don't have the control over the land outside of the application side. It would be unreasonable. We couldn't condition that either. What it is saying in terms of that standard condition is that no delivery shall take place before 7 o'clock. So there would be an expectation that there are no delivery vehicles on the site before 7 o'clock.
Can we strengthen that at all?
I think we've got to be consistent with what is there at the moment for Waitrose, and to strengthen that, all I think we can do is perhaps put an informative down advising the applicant of the concerns and the issues in that respect. But beyond that, it's probably difficult to go much further.
Maybe that could be added as an informative.
Yeah.
Talking of advisories, can I ask you, are you talking to the agent or are you talking to Lidl, or both?
As part of this process, you work with the agent.
So
Quad.
you don't have any contact with Lidl either, because what concerns me, and he worked around it, is Lidl do not allow staff to park on site. They do not allow it, and that is part of their being. And they encourage their staff to park in the side roads. I've had that from a member of staff at Lidl, obviously won't name them. And this is going to cause problems on Earlswood Park, Looping Close, anywhere where anybody will park and then walk up. In a perfect world, everybody would walk to work or get the bus to work or get the train to work in a perfect world, but we're not in a perfect world. We're in the middle of a housing estate on main A30, and this is going to cause great problems. So if something can be done, the overflow car park looking at the development to the left is always unofficially the staff car park, which is used by Waitrose, Cotswold, Pets at Home, and some of the subway staff. Why can that not continue? And can that be asked in a nice way?
The condition 10 deals with travel plan. The condition 10 deals with the travel plan, and part of that could be to do with how the staff are coming into the site and where they're going to park. What we can do to reinforce that condition and what we expect from them in that condition is to put an informative on again that says about the needs for staff parking within the site. It needs to be brought into the travel plan. So then that's brought into the requirements, it's flagged up there. So we can put an informative to that in that regard as well. That's the reason.
Right. Councillor Whitcroft, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Tapper, if there are new points, please. I'm conscious that we are beginning to go around this. So, Councillor Whitcroft, no. Councillor
Yeah, Councillor just said very quietly, can we assist on it? I think that if there's a breach of the travel plan further down the line, then, well...
So in respect to the travel plan, we will consult the County Highways Authority as to the, I know, but we will consult the County Highways on that to get their feedback and advice on the travel plan, as obviously they will be able, they're the people we have to go to, I'm afraid. But beyond that, as Duncan said, it would be enforceability via the condition.
Can we have a condition that says that the applicant must demonstrate adequate car parking spaces, i.e. they must be designated for car parking?
My understanding of this is that the applicant is not the operator. So we have no relationship with the operator, correct?
We can't insist on specific spaces being allocated for certain things within it because it's a shared car park. But what we can do is, through the travel plan, is work out and make sure that they allocate the parking for their staff, that the staff are allocated there.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just caution Councillor White not to use Lidl at Blackwater as an example of what Lidl may or may not provide in terms of parking for staff. Blackwater's car park is a fraction of the size of Waitrose. Indeed, they had to buy up associated land alongside the existing car park in order to expand it, because customers were coming and then having to go away because they couldn't find any parking spaces, and that was with no parking spaces allocated for staff of Lidl. So Blackwater is not a good example to use as what might be the situation here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. It is a fair point. Okay, we have been around this. I'm going to draw this to a close. We have an officer recommendation. We have some amendments, which are?
So firstly, amendment to condition 5, which is in respect of the opening hours for the HGV, the operating hours for the HGV back to 9:30 p.m. We'll agree the precise wording with Chairman, Vice Chairman and Ward Councillors. We've then got 2 informatives that I'm aware of. One is in respect to the servicing and how they come in the mornings. And then secondly is to do with the travel plan and the requirements as part of the travel plan, and in terms of how the staff are going to operate and to pick up the concerns raised in that respect. And again, we'll agree that wording with the Chairman and Vice Chair and Ward Councillors.
Thank you for that. Mr. Scott, are you content? Right. Is there a proposal and a seconder for the recommendation with amendments? Right, I'll propose. Councillor Tapper seconding. All those in agreement. Mr. Scott, you. Thank you.
So the members voting in favour of the officer recommendation is amended. Councillors Perry, sorry, I'm going to start again. Councillors Allaway, Gordon, Perry, Ratteram, Tapper, Whitcroft and Wheeler. And Hawkins, sorry.
Against?
Members voting against the officer recommendation, Councillors Betton, Morley, Lewis, Skipper and White. None.
Thank you, members. That's carried 8 votes to 5. Thank you very much indeed. It's coming up to 9:30. We are getting close to the witching hour, and I'm going to crack on if members don't mind, which takes us through to item 3 on page 95, 151 Gordon Avenue, Camberley. I will make a group declaration as the applicant is Surrey Heath Borough Council. Are we losing some of our committee? Do we need just a 2-minute break, or we? Water, that's absolutely fine. While Mr. Prain gets in position, we can. Right, Councillor, we won't go into detail. Right. Can you please be quick, because we will run out of time tonight if we're not careful.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the helicopter view there, and you can see the red line is around the application site. It just sits to the southeast of Gordon Avenue, Chillingham Way just to the north, the east of the site where I'm moving the mouse, and at the Frimley to Camberley railway line, just there to the northern side of your picture. Here's the application building. It's an existing 5-bed family home. You can see there's parking on the front there. And just to give you the complete picture, looking east there towards Park Street, and then I turn around and I'm looking west, which will, if you follow that road, will eventually get you to Frimley Road. The proposal is to convert the accommodation into short-term accommodation for up to six homeless people. Here we have the existing floor plans on the left and the proposed ground floor plan on the right. In essence, there are no external changes to the building, and the internal changes are quite modest. Introduction of 6 bedrooms across all 4 floors. So to accommodate, it's currently a 5-bedroom. To get the 6th bedroom, we have that ground floor bedroom introduced. There's also a staff room, as you can see on the right-hand drawing on the ground floor, a communal lounge, kitchen, and WC facilities on each floor for residents, staff, and volunteers. So just going back to the photo, while I quickly give you an overview, the proposed use will be a safe haven for homeless people who will be placed at the property by an experienced homeless charity with a goal to offer support to move from homelessness to settled lives in the community. There will be a maximum of 6 homeless people occupying the 6-bedroom property at any one time, and the proposal is to provide short-term accommodation for homeless people, and this will be achieved through a formal tenancy agreement with each individual occupier. As set out in your reports, the accommodation is not direct access or walk-in, with all prospective residents assessed off-site to ensure the accommodation is a suitable placement for them. There will always be staff or volunteers on site at any time that residents are there, and the property as you can see from the photograph, there is parking on site. The report that sets out that their recommendation is to approve. I've got no further updates for you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brain. I have one very quick question. The use is sui generis. In the event that, potentially unlikely event maybe, or the fortunate event that this accommodation is not needed, what would happen to the use in the event that the Borough Council disposed of the building?
Thank you, Chairman. If I draw your attention to page 100 of your reports, and I'll turn you to informative 3 right at the end of the text. As you rightly say, it is a sui generis use, and thankfully in planning regulations, sui generis uses always require planning permission for any future changes of use. So we've put that informative there, which will carry forward to any decision notice, just to give certainty to any future landowner that there are those restrictions on the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification. Members, comprehensive report there. Any questions? If not, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Gordon and Councillor Tapper, all those in agreement? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. On to the next item, page 107, 17 Sefton Close, West End. Group declaration here in that the applicant is, of course, a fellow councillor. Are there any declarations, any others to make? No, Mr. Prain, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, as you rightly pointed out, the application has been wrought, usually would be determined under delegated authority by your officers, but it's been reported to the Planning Applications Committee this evening because the applicant is the serving councillor of Surrey Heath Borough Council. On to the presentation. We start as always with a helicopter view, Sefton Close. The actual application, property number 17, has the red line round it. What's interesting with this site, it actually has 2 elevations at front on Sefton Close. So where I'm moving the mouse now is the front elevation. And when I refer to front, I'll be talking about this principal elevation here. But we also have a side elevation here that fronts on Sefton Close, and all will become clear as we move through the presentation. So here is that front elevation. You've got number 18 just to the right of your photograph. And that's just the zoomed out view where you can see the road and the property fronting onto it. Then as I move around the property, here I am on that side elevation that also fronts onto the road with the garage block here that's proposed to be demolished and replaced with a two-storey rear extension. There's number 16 Sefton Close, just to show you that relationship between the properties. And finally, I've just included the conservatory because the conservatory is proposed to be demolished, and you can just see the roof of number 16 beyond, just to help with orientating ourselves with this particular proposal. So onto the actual nuts and bolts of the proposal. Where I'm moving the mouse now is a single-storey side projection that's proposed when the conservatory is demolished. And then on the back here, we have the two-storey extension after the garage block is demolished. Just to help understand that in our mind's eye, we have the proposed ground and first floor plans. Dark grey is existing, light grey is proposed. Here we have that side single-storey extension here where I'm moving the mouse, which wraps around to the rear. Then that first floor rear extension here. Moving on to the existing and proposed elevations. Here's that front elevation, conservatory to the right where I'm moving the mouse. Then to your left-hand drawing, you see that's replaced with that side extension. One other thing I just want to point out to you, the tile hanging here on the front of the property is to be replaced by a render finish where I'm moving the mouse. I'll just quickly move around the dwelling just for completeness. There's the conservatory on the left on that existing side. We moved and the existing single-storey garage block. And here on the right-hand, during the proposed side elevation, you have the single-storey side extension and that first floor, part two-storey rear extension just showing there. And then we just see the other side of that just to give you that depth of that two-storey extension on the right-hand side and that single-storey to the left. And then just to finish the picture, this is the final elevation that faces onto Sefton Road. Again, you can see the two-storey element here where I'm moving the mouse and what's to be demolished on the left. I did have one update for you, and in my excitement, sorry, I forgot to tell you about it. There is an additional condition proposed, and it's actually quite timely we're talking about it on this elevation, which is no windows in the proposal where I'm moving the mouse for obvious overlooking reasons. That's all I have for you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. You beat me to it. I was going to ask that one, looking at the windows on the next door property. Members, any questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. It's just really about the orientation of the site. So it's the impact of that second storey on the neighbouring property in terms of their garden and that window angle, presumably into the back. If you could just clarify on that, please. And the no opening windows. Yeah. There is obviously a window that will open at the back, not on the one with the chimney on the outside, but the other one. That's new, isn't it? Or am I misreading it? If you could just go back one slide, please.
Yes, I'm happy to cover that off.
Thank you.
If we can go back to the presentation, please. So I think if I explain it with the helicopter view first, and then if we move on to the floor plans, I think that will help us just get our bearings. I'm just showing the mouse here. So that side elevation is where the mouse is moving up and down now, and it's obviously facing onto number 16. Yeah. And then if we go to the floor plans, so where I'm moving the mouse down now here is that bottom section. So we're talking about those first floor, the first floor opportunities for overlooking, because on the ground floor, any windows would look onto the fence, obviously. There are two existing windows here where I'm moving the mouse, and it's probably shown here. So you have the landing window here, which is existing, and that first floor window here that's existing. So that's already established overlooking. But what we're doing is preventing any further windows in this closer section that is closer to number 16. So that would have a greater level of overlooking given its proximity to the boundary. And it's just there to protect number 16 from any potential overlooking. Thank you. Yes, this is the north elevation, correct. Yeah, so if I go back to the aerial, that's the northern section here where I'm just moving the mouse. That's along here, correct.
So essentially the property is south. So essentially the extended property is south of the property next door to it, to number 16.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
But number 16 sits further back, so there shouldn't be any loss of light stroke window light.
Yes, I mean that's the conclusion that's been brought in the report. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was trying to work with that. Any other Questions, comments? If not, we have a recommendation. Is there a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Perry, and who's going to second one? That? Nobody? I will. Sorry, Councillor White. Councillor White. Councillor Perry, Councillor White. All those in agreement with the recommendation?
Voting in favour of the officer's recommendation to grant. Councillors Alloway, Gordon, Morley, Lewis, Perry, Ratteram, Skipper, Tapper, Whitcroft, Wheeler, White, Wheeler, Hawkins.
Against? Abstain?
Abstaining, Councillor Cliff Betton.
Numbers? Members, that's carried 12 to 1, that's right. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Members, just a little bit of housekeeping before we go any further. The next item, you will know, is in two parts. We will deal with the first part in the public part of the agenda, so there'll be no questions taken whatsoever in relation to the second part of this item. We will then go into confidential to deal with this. We have time, but we are conscious we're creeping near to the 10 o'clock watershed. If we get close to that, we will need to take a vote unless we take it now to continue. Yeah, we will take we have two items left. We have this next item in two parts, and then we have the informative. Are members happy for us to carry on? The cut-off date is 10:30. Are you proposing that, Councillor Wheeler? No. Are you against it, Councillor Wheeler? You are.
Sorry, I think there's a number of items here. I think there's likely to be quite a bit of discussion, and I actually think we would better to delay this item and hear it when we've got enough time to give both the respect to the officers that have spent a lot of time and have got a lot of feedback to us, and also no doubt an awful lot of questions that will come from members. Let's put it this way, I have a lot of questions. I doubt very much you're going to get through them in 15 minutes.
In which case, right, what is the view of the committee? Do you want to, we have a split here. We can carry on with the agenda item and then go through to 10:30, or we can, the alternative is we will go straight into confidential and take the informative item, and that will be, to all intents and purposes, unless there's time, we could always come back out of confidential, but I think I'm looking for guidance here. Yeah, right. In which case, we will now go into confidential. We will deal with the informative item. So I'm sorry, anybody that is still with us watching, we are going to have to go into confidential, and we will come out of it, but if you are still there, we'll be pleased to see you. Isn't it, Peter? Right, on that basis, when I find my bit of paper, right, the committee is advised to resolve that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as set out below, which is item A in part, paragraph 1, item 9, paragraph 1, and item 10, paragraph 1. Are you in agreement with that, members? Yes.